USA job alert. Hospital night guard needed. That line blinked on my screen like a beacon meant only for me. A simple night shift, 25 an hour, 8 hours of quiet watching. Responsibilities included monitoring wards of through C and ensuring the morgue remained locked after midnight. There was nothing unusual in the listing except one line at the bottom, follow final instructions in locker number 3. I remember staring at those words, feeling something cold crawl beneath my ribs. The ad didn't list the hospital's history, but I knew the name, St. Augustine Memorial. It had been closed for renovations after a fire in the late 90s. Locals still called it the sleeping place, a nickname whispered like superstition. I laughed at the rumors then. I told myself that ghosts didn't sign paychecks and old buildings just creaked. Still, when the confirmation email arrived, plain text, no logo, no signature, the subject line read only, your shift begins tonight. There was no contact number, no interview. Just the address, the time, and those same words again at the bottom, locker number 3. I told my reflection in the monitor, half joking, easy money. But the cursor kept blinking, waiting, like it wanted to ask me if I was sure. Outside my apartment, thunder rolled over the city. Somewhere deep inside, a warning bell rang that I chose to ignore. After all, it was just a job, and I needed the money. It was 11:15 when I reached St. Augustine Memorial. The rain had thickened into sheets that smeared the world into shapes instead of details. The building stood alone at the end of a cracked road, its sign half-lit, letters missing so that it read simply, St. Augu. MEM. My car's headlights caught the security gate, rusty, chained open, as if someone had been expecting me. The guard booth beside it was empty, a thermos lying on its side inside, leaking something that steamed faintly in the cold air. I left the engine running for a while, just listening to the wipers. The air smelled like wet concrete and rust. Something about it reminded me of a basement that had never really dried out. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. Every sound I made seemed to echo too long, the slam of my door, the crunch of my boots, even my breathing came back at me, slightly delayed. The hospital loomed closer with every step, windows black as eyes that had seen too much. For a moment, I thought I saw movement behind one of them, a pale face, maybe a reflection. But when I lifted the beam, it was Dawn. Inside, the lobby was still. My flashlight beam caught faded posters on the wall, safety drills, patient rights, fire evacuation plans dated 1997. The floor tiles were yellowed and warped, and a soft dripping echoed from somewhere deep down the hall. My radio crackled to life suddenly, though I hadn't turned it on yet. It emitted a single burst of static, like a whisper too quiet to catch. Then silence. I found the security desk and the duty log, pages brittle with age. The last entry was dated 2001, a short note scrawled in red pen, all exits secure. Do not leave post. I tried to laugh it off. Just another relic. Still, my fingers hesitated over the logbook pen. My reflection in the cracked glass looked like someone else, uniform soaked, eyes dim. For a second, I almost turned around, went back to the car. But then I remembered the ad, the line nav. The door to the security office groaned when I pushed it open, like it hadn't moved in years. Inside, the air was heavier, stale, metallic, filled with that faint electric hum that old wiring makes when it's barely alive. 6 monitors sat on the desk, covered in dust, their screens a dull gray static that pulsed like a heartbeat. I wiped one with my sleeve and, to my surprise, it flickered on, showing a corridor I didn't recognize. The timestamp read 23:04. A shade moved across the frame, slow, deliberate. I leaned closer, trying to make sense of it, but the feed glitched, lines tearing through the image, and when it cleared, the hallway was empty again. I told myself it was probably just interference, but my pulse didn't believe me. On the wall above the desk hung a faded corkboard filled with old shift notes, taped memos, and yellowed incident reports. One caught my eye, a torn page that read, Ward C restricted after incident December 14th. Keys remain with Security Supervisor Miller. Below it, a small envelope was pinned, dry with age. I opened it. Inside was a single brass key labeled Ward C. I placed it carefully on the desk. Beneath it, I noticed the locker keys, numbered, and there it was again, number 3. The locker room was adjacent to the office, separated by a heavy metal door. The key turned reluctantly, screeching as I opened it. Rows of lockers lined the wall, some hanging open, uniforms still inside, as if their owners had simply vanished mid-shift. Locker number 3 stood at the far end, cleaner than the rest. Its door was shut tight, no rust, no dust, just waiting. I hesitated. My reflection shimmered faintly on the metal, distorted by the flickering fluorescent above. When I finally pulled it open, a gust of cold air spilled out. Inside was a folded piece of paper, perfectly white, too new for this place. On it, printed in block letters, were 4 words, "Do not look up." My heart thudded once, hard. The ceiling light flickered again. I stared at the note, unsure whether to laugh or tear it apart. But something, a drop of moisture maybe, landed on the paper. It spread dark, almost red in the dim light. Against every instinct I had, I looked up. The light bulb swayed slightly. And for just a second, there was something above it, a shape hanging upside down, long and thin, gone before I could focus. My flashlight clicked off by itself, and the monitors in the next room came alive all at once. The monitors in the office flickered like eyes waking up. Each screen showed a different part of the hospital, the hall to Ward A, the elevator doors, the reception desk, even the empty parking lot outside. I watched for a while, listening to the low buzz of electricity that seemed to echo in the walls. The building felt alive, breathing slowly through its pipes and vents. I took the flashlight, the brass key, and began my patrol. My boots left damp prints on the tile. The hallway stretched on forever, one identical door after another. Patient rooms stood open, beds stripped bare, the air heavy with dust and something sweet, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. The signs still hung above the doors: pediatrics, surgery, intensive care. But the lights inside flickered as if uncertain whether they wanted to remember or forget. Near Ward B, I heard a sound, faint, rhythmic, like footsteps echoing mine. I stopped, and it stopped. I turned slowly, the flashlight beam trembling against the cracked paint of the walls. There was nothing there. Only silence, and the faint hum of old fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I radioed the office, though no one was listening. "This is guard 22. Doing a sweep of Ward B." "All clear," I said, more to fill the silence than anything else. The radio hissed softly, then a voice whispered back, not static, not feedback, a whisper so clear it felt close enough to touch. It said my name. I froze. "Repeat transmission," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Nothing. Just breathing, not mine. Slow, wet, close. I lowered the radio and looked down the corridor again. A door at the far end stood ajar now, one that had been closed moments ago. The monitors in the office flickered like eyes waking up. Each screen showed a different part of the hospital, the hall to Ward A, the elevator doors, the reception desk, even the empty parking lot outside. I watched for a while, listening to the low buzz of electricity that seemed to echo in the walls. The building felt alive, breathing slowly through its pipes and vents. I took the flashlight, the brass key, and began my patrol. My boots left damp prints on the tile. The hallway stretched on forever, one identical door after another. Patient rooms stood open, beds stripped bare, the air heavy with dust and something sweet, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. The signs still hung above the doors: pediatrics, surgery, intensive care. But the lights inside flickered as if uncertain whether they wanted to remember or forget. Near Ward B, I heard a sound, faint, rhythmic, like footsteps echoing mine. I stopped, and it stopped. I turned slowly, the flashlight beam trembling against the cracked paint of the walls. There was nothing there. Only silence, and the faint hum of old fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I radioed the office, though no one was listening. "This is guard 22. Doing a sweep of Ward B." "All clear," I said, more to fill the silence than anything else. The radio hissed softly, then a voice whispered back, not static, not feedback, a whisper so clear it felt close enough to touch. It said my name. I froze. "Repeat transmission," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Nothing. Just breathing, not mine. Slow, wet, close. I lowered the radio and looked down the corridor again. A door at the far end stood ajar now, one that had been closed moments ago. I should have called it in. I should have left. But some part of me wanted to know. I walked toward the door, counting my steps just to hear something human. 12, 13, 14, then the door creaked wider on its own. The room beyond was dark except for the faint red light of an exit sign flickering above the bed. On the sheets lay a hospital badge, half buried in dust. I wiped it clean. The name read K. Miller, security supervisor. The same name from the report in the office. A sound came from the hallway behind me, metal tapping against tile, once, twice, 3 times. I turned, flashlight raised, and caught only the edge of movement. Something tall, pale, and long slipping around the corner. I followed without thinking, heart pounding. The radio hissed again, that whispering voice returning just long enough to say one word, more. The stairwell leading down to the morgue was colder than the rest of the hospital, as if the air itself had forgotten how to move. My flashlight beam quivered over the peeling walls, catching flecks of old paint that floated like ash. Each step groaned beneath me, echoing off the concrete until it felt like the sound came from beneath my feet instead of above. The deeper I went, the heavier the silence became. Even the hum of the building seemed to die out. Only the sound of my heartbeat kept me company. At the bottom of the stairs, a heavy metal door waited, the word morgue stenciled in faded black letters. The brass key for Ward C felt warm in my hand now, though I don't remember taking it out of my pocket. The handle resisted for a second before turning with a soft click. The smell that came through was sharp and cold, a mix of disinfectant and something far older. I stepped inside. The room stretched wider than I expected. Stainless steel tables lined the center, and along the far wall, the drawers, 32 of them, numbered and identical. The fluorescent lights above flickered in rhythm with my breath. One drawer was already slightly open, number 7. I approached slowly, each step careful, as though I might wake something sleeping inside. When I touched the handle, the light above me buzzed violently, flashing once before dying altogether. In that brief flicker of darkness, I felt a rush of air behind me, a whisper brushing the back of my neck. I turned fast, beam trembling across the room, but there was nothing. Only the faint hum of the freezer units and the quiet rattle of the vent. I tried to steady my breathing. Finally, I pulled the drawer open. Inside was a white sheet, perfectly folded. No body. Just another hospital badge resting on top, Keith Miller, the same one from the room upstairs. Beneath it, a note. Locker number 3 is not yours. The door behind me slammed shut. My flashlight dimmed again. Through the tiny viewing window, I saw movement, a figure standing just beyond the glass, too still to be alive. It tilted its head slightly, the way someone studies their own reflection. The figure wore my uniform, my badge, my face. Every light in the morgue flared white for a second, and when they faded, I was alone again, or so I thought. The radio crackled from somewhere near the door, the same distorted voice whispering a final word that made my blood freeze. Stay. When the radio went silent again, the quiet that followed felt thick enough to breathe. I stood there in the morgue, the air colder than before, my breath hanging like smoke that refused to fade. Somewhere behind the walls, I heard the building exhale, a slow mechanical sigh, as if it had been holding something in for too long. I turned toward the door, ready to leave, ready to pretend the whole night had been nothing but a hallucination born of stress and caffeine. But the door was already open. The hallway beyond glowed faintly red, the same emergency lights I'd seen earlier, flickering like a pulse. I walked back through corridors that no longer looked the same. The walls seemed to ripple, stretching and shrinking between heartbeats. Each step echoed twice, once ahead of me and once behind. At the junction near the elevator, I saw the monitors again, dozens of them now, stacked against the walls, all playing footage from moments ago. Every screen showed me walking, breathing, looking around. But one feed was different. In that one, I wasn't moving. I was standing perfectly still, head tilted toward the camera, eyes wide open. I reached the security office, trembling. The brass key I'd carried was gone. In its place, my pocket held another envelope, damp and cold. Inside, a new note. Your shift begins at 11. Locker number 3. Do not look up. The handwriting was mine. I stared at it until the edges blurred, then looked toward the monitors again. The figure on screen smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of lips that I didn't feel on my own face. The lights began to dim, one by one, leaving only the monitor glow. I sat down in the chair where I'd first started, trying to convince myself to wait for sunrise, to hold still until help arrived. But the building had its own rhythm, its own clock. The monitors all reset to 2300 hours, the exact time I'd first walked in. Somewhere deep below, a door slammed, maybe the morgue, maybe something else. I whispered into the dark, I want to go home. The radio clicked, and a voice that sounded almost like mine answered, calm, certain, patient, welcome to your first night. The screens flickered once more, and every single one showed the same thing, the security office, empty except for the uniform hanging neatly on the chair and the glow of a monitor still waiting for the next guard to arrive.